Hey guys, let me get this. All right. Okay, so I know this says Monday, and I know that the kids are out on Monday. It was my mistake when I made this. So this is technically Tuesday when you see this. So this is Tuesday, the math video notes. Now, this week we are going to start to compare and round decimals. Comparing and rounding decimals is very similar to comparing and rounding whole numbers, except we're just adding that decimal portion to it. So it says right here, use what you know. You already know how to compare and round whole numbers. In this lesson, you will use place value understanding to compare and round decimals. So if we read the little thing right there, it says Grace has a collection of buttons in a jar. The blue buttons are 8/1000ths a meter wide, and the red buttons are 2/100ths meter wide. Which color is whiter? So this is going to give you a breakdown on how to come up with the answer. It's a long process, but it helps you understand what is better. And then I'll show you the kind of the quick way to do it. But we're going to do this whole walkthrough process just to understand. All right, so right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to answer A through G. So A, it says, in the number 8/1000ths and 2/100ths, what place values are the 8 and the 2? All right, so we have the tenths, hundredths, thousands. So the 8 is in the thousands place. Okay, and the 2 is in the tenths, hundredths place. All right. So now we're going to compare the place values. There are blank thousandths and 100ths. Okay, so what they're asking you is how many thousandths are there in 100? Now, what you have to think about is going back to the place value chart, or tenths, hundredths, thousandths. All right. And you have to think, how many times larger is the number to the left? Okay, and we know that 100ths is 10 times larger than the thousandths. So that means that there are 10 thousandths in 100ths. Also, you can think about our cubes and our blocks that we played, whether we used the other day, our base 10 blocks. How many thousandths were there in 100ths? So we have to think about that. So, all right, so there are 10 thousandths and 100 thousandths. Okay, the next question is, how do you know that 8 thousandths is less than less than 100ths? Well, look back up here. If 10 thousandths are in 100ths, and if I look at the number 8, I know that 8 thousandths is less than 10 thousandths. Which is equal, which I'm just going to do, which equals 100. So we're going to write an inequality. So an inequality is basically the greater than, less than, equal to, okay? That's what it means when you hear an inequality. So based on what we know that 8 thousandths is less than 100ths. Now, if you remember back to when in the first, second grade, you always said that the alligator ate the larger number. That's still true, but we don't say it like that. Okay? Yes, in your head you can think that, but just say it's going to be 8 thousandths is less than 100th. Okay, now think whether 200ths is greater than or less than 1,000ths. Sorry, I can't read today. 200ths is greater than 100th. Write an inequality statement to compare 8 thousandths and 200ths. Well, just think about it. I have 200ths and I have 100ths. Which one's greater? The 200ths. Okay. Explain how you know this inequality is correct. Well, I know that 8 thousandths. Wait, I wrote that wrong. Oh, no, I didn't. That's right. So if yes, I did. If 200ths is greater than 100th, and 100th is greater than 8 thousandths, then that means that 200ths is greater than 8 thousandths. Because we already know that 100th is greater than 200, so it would just be the same thing. So based on all this information, which button is wider? You would say the red button. Now I'm going to show you, that was the long drawn out way to do it. Here's the easy few step process. Line your numbers up. 8,000. Just line your numbers up like this. Okay. And you can put a 0 here if you wanted to. Okay. And just go down the row. The zeros are the same. So, okay. Zeros are the same. Now we come to this. I have a 0 compared to a 1. Which one's bigger? 0 or 1? The 1 is bigger. So this is your bigger number. That's the real simple way to do it. And that's the way that I actually prefer you do it, because you can get lost between A to G. This is very simple and self-explanatory. So let's keep with this. All right. So to compare decimals, you can think about how to express the number in different ways. Each row in the table shows other ways to express the same number. Basically, this is just how we can say a dozen is equal to 12. These are ways to do this. We know that there are 10 hundredths and 1/10. So we know that 10 hundredths is equal to 1/10. 10 hundredths is equal to 1/10. There are 10 thousandths and 100ths. Same thing here and same thing here. And if there are 10 hundredths and a tenth, and there are 10 thousandths and a hundredths, then 10 times 10 is 100 thousandths is in a tenth. So it's equal to that. Now, another way to work this is a number line. The decimal 8, 0.008 is 8 thousandths. Since 8 thousandths is less than 10 thousandths, then 8 thousandths is less than 10 thousandths. Expressing numbers in different ways can also help you round decimals. To round 8 thousandths to the nearest hundredth is to determine whether it's closer to 0 or 1/100th. Just like you do with a whole number, you round the decimal down if it's less than halfway between the two values. So Miss Brittany gave me this little ditty. Let's see, it's called, 5 or more, raise the score, 4 or less, let it rest. So basically, if a number is greater than 5, then you would round it to the next thing. If it's less than 4, you leave it alone. So let's look right here at the number line. Now this number line has been broken down into the smaller digits. So you see you have 5 thousandths, 10 thousandths, which is equal to 1/10, 15 thousandths, 20 thousandths, which is equal to 2 hundredths. Okay? So we have our 8 thousandths right here. Now, we have to find out if it's closer to the 0 or to the 10 thousandths. So just by looking right here, I can see, so here's your 1, and there's your 0. The 8 is much closer to the 10 thousandths. So that means if I were to round, okay, if I were to round the 8 thousandths to the nearest hundredth, it would be 100th. Okay. Another way to look at it is like this, and this is the way that I prefer, but we will actually eventually be doing the number line, is write the number down, underline the digit that we're rounding to, and we're rounding to the nearest hundredth. Look to the neighbor. If that number is greater than 5, this number goes up by 1. If it's 4 or less, this number gets to stay the same. So 8 is greater than 5, so the 0 gets to go up to 1. Okay. So let's look right here. Look at the number line above. Okay. Is 13 thousandths more or less than halfway between 100th and 200ths? Okay, the very first thing we need to do is we need to find out each I call these tallies or marks, how much each one of these represents. And I know they represent 1/1000ths apiece. So this is 11 right here. So this next one right here would be 11 thousandths, 12 thousandths, 13 thousandths, 14 thousandths, and then you have right here your 15 thousandths. Okay? So we have our 13 thousandths, which is right there. Now, is the 13 thousandths, okay, is that more than halfway between the 1 and the 2? Or is it less than halfway? Very good. It's less than halfway. So it says, look at the number line above. Is 13 thousandths more or less than halfway between the 100th and 200ths? Okay, so we would put 13 thousandths is less than halfway between 100th and 200th. How do we know that? I know that because, think about it, 13 is less than the 15, which is the halfway point, right? So the 13 is less than 15. Because 13 hundredths is less than 15 thousandths, meaning it is less than halfway. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do an activity that's going to help you better understand comparing. And I know that first lesson may sound really weird, but it's just wanting you to see that there are different ways to come to an answer, but sometimes the best ways are the easier ways. And this right here is the easier way to do it when we compare. Even when you have to line up several, like a list of numbers from greatest to least, line them up. It's much easier than guessing or looking through that whole process. So right here, be a math detective, line the numbers up, look closely when comparing. Now, we have 5 digits, 5 boxes, but then you're like, well, Miss Moore, there's a decimal. Yeah, and it's real easy. So what we're going to do is we're going to write both numbers down. 4, 7, 8, 2, 4. And I'm just going to put my decimal right there. Same thing. 4, 7, 8, 4, 2. Put my decimal down. All right, now we get to examine the number completely. So you're going to start off with the highest place value, which is the tens place. Our 4s are the same. Okay, so we can't do that. Now we move to our ones place. The 1s are the same. We can't use those. Now we can't compare the decimal. Our tenths place. 8 tenths and 8 tenths. They're the same. Now the hundredths, we have 2 hundredths and 4 hundredths. They are different. Now, is 2 greater or less than 4? That's right. 2 is less than 4. So this right here is your larger number because 4 is greater than 2. So I'm going to come right down here and I'm just going to draw my inequality. Just like that. Okay. 3 more to go. Okay, so I have 75 and 876 thousandths compared to 75 and 786 thousandths. So like we did before, write the numbers down. Okay. And then you just compare your numbers. Compare the tens place, the ones place, all the way down till you find a number that's different. So our 7s are the same. The 5s and the ones place are the same. But our tenths places are different. I have an 8 and then a 7. What's the larger number, the 8 or the 7? That's right, the 8. So that's your larger number. So that means that 75 and 876 thousandths is smaller. So that means the pointy end is going to point in that direction than 75 and 786 thousandths. Okay, next one. I have 67 and 371 thousandths and 67 and 317 thousandths. So look at your place values and look at the digits in each place value. I have a 6. They're in the tens place. They're the same. The ones place are the same. The tenths place are the same. The hundredths places, they're different. I have a 7 and a 1. Okay, if you compare 7 and 1, which one's larger? That's right, the 7. Okay, so 67 and 371 thousandths is larger than 67 and 315 thousandths. I'm sorry, 17 thousandths. Next one, 51 and 981 thousandths compared to 51 and 891 thousandths. Okay, let's look at the numbers. The tens place are the same. The ones place is the same. Our tens places are different. We have a 9 and an 8. Which one is larger, 9 or 8? It's very good, the 9. So that means that 51 and 981 thousandths is larger than 51 and 891 thousandths. Now that was your video lesson. So right now what I need you to do is I need you to go ahead and get started on your Monday math practice. And that'll be all today for math. Have a good afternoon.